Welcome to the third episode of the Deep Wild Tech podcast, where we discuss UFOs, technology, science, and memes. I'm your host, Wild Trees. I'm a scientist who studies the paranormal, and I'm super duper excited today about the start of a large podcast all about Poltergeist, if you've ever wondered. But I have a guest who's going to be helping us on this journey. So my guest is Stephanie Quick, and
Hello.
here's there she is. Oh my gosh! Here is an intro for Stephanie. So as a girl, Stephanie Quick found herself captivated by the stories contained in the alien eyeballed covers of Strangely Enough. Aside from the odd levitation, she didn't get much in the way of actual experience of the strange until a near-death experience at the age of 21. This event, and following esoteric practices taught by the entities encountered in her NDE, resulted in a wide range of high strange events, including premonitions, empathetic communication with the dead and the living, telepathic communication with trees, missing time with a gnome, and an outrageous number of synchronicities. Using models from anthropology, the humanities, and esoteric theory and practice, Quick endeavors to develop new questions and understanding about the world of the high strange, not just as an intellectual exercise, but in order to help interested people, experiencers or not, gain insight into these phenomenon. Thank you, Stephanie, for being here.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. This has been a lot of fun. We've already recorded, as you know, some material on your plans, your ideas about thought experiments involving poltergeists, and it's been very intriguing for me, and I'm really enjoying it. So thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. So the format of this talk is going to be, I'm going to give, with the help of Stephanie, a background on poltergeist that is by no means definitive, but it might give us a little bit of context. Then I will present a plan that I have on how to trap these poltergeists, and Stephanie is going to give me some feedback. Now, we had this conversation a week ago. That's important, so we've had a week to think about it, and because at the last part of the podcast, the last segment, will be recorded today, and it'll be about what are our thoughts on this plan, having thought about it for a week. Okay. So here we go, part one. What the heck is a poltergeist? What's going on here? So I will say that I got all of this information from a great encyclopedia called Man, Myth, and Magic, an illustrated encyclopedia of the supernatural. And boy, what a great encyclopedia. There is a lengthy article on poltergeist. It's very academic, and I will just cite the author, who is A.R.G. Owen, writing in the encyclopedia Man, Myth, and Magic for the Poltergeist section, and I will put a scholarly link to this writing in the citation for this podcast. Okay, talking about poltergeist, let's talk about the word. Usually, like in science for sure, a lot of scientific words are in Latin, and if you could decipher them, you actually learn a lot about the subject. And so poltergeist, let's decipher what it means in the language. So originally, it's a German folklore term, and it's compounded from two parts. Okay, so there's polter, which is a noise or racket, okay, and then geist, which is a spirit or sprite, okay. And so this German folklore term indicates a nature spirit of like status to an elf or a goblin or their ilk. So these are the origins of the term, and I think we could get some information from them, at least what originally was thought about them. Now, subsequently, since this time, it's acquired a wider definition. So let's talk about that. So a lot of times now we talk more about poltergeist phenomenon, or the events that happen around a poltergeist. So type of phenomena that are associated with a poltergeist are very diverse, and they include movement of objects, flinging of mud or stones, teleportation. So here's a specific example: the mysterious conveyance of articles into closed rooms. I gather from that is that there was a house, and then an object was put in that room with it being closed, so it kind of just teleported there. Okay, so
Yeah,
then
that's an interesting aspect of these things because poltergeists are very associated, and these reports go back at least a couple thousand years if you're looking at historical documentation where you could find hauntings or infestations or clusters of events that have these various characteristics. But the stone throwing is fascinating because lots of times if you're outside, let's say, you'll get these stones thrown at you, and it looks, kind of like you think, okay, something's just moving this rock. But then when you talk about teleportation, there have been reports of stone throwing inside of houses where witnesses have said a couple of strange things about these reports. And a lot of my information, this weird information you could find from Colin Wilson's book Poltergeist, with an exclamation point in all caps. It's the title. He has some great historical stuff and odd reports in there. But you'll get people saying that it looked like they were looking up at the ceiling, and you kind of see a rock seem to kind of materialize and then get thrown. Other times you'll see like a rock seems to be coming out from like another room or something, but it kind of looks like more like something's holding it. It doesn't just have like a regular thrown trajectory. It'll be a little bit too slow, or it'll make a jog in the trajectory. So there's this very uncanny nature to even something as simple as think, well, just imagining there's an entity there picking up and throwing this stone, but you can't see it. No, it's much weirder than that. So I think the teleportation is a good one. And there'll be, this can go way beyond stones, but there's a lot of manipulation of objects in uncanny and strange ways associated with poltergeist reports.
Right, and I mean these things. Lifting of objects and moving objects. Some of these objects can be weapons, so it can be dangerous. So let's see. Let's round up some of these. So thank you for that, and I will say something about that as well. But okay, so they do the teleportation. Okay, they produce noises. Okay, noises like raps, bangs, or scratchings, or sounds creepily imitating a human whistle, singing, or talking. That's a little intro. And I will say right now, there are a lot of hypotheses. These are scientific questions that we're trying to answer about what is causing poltergeist. And we're going to go over a lot of them. We're going to discuss a plan on trapping what we believe is an entity, so an individual that's causing these things. But we also think that they could be caused by other things in general. So we don't believe in just one cause of poltergeist phenomenon, but we do think one cause is an entity, and we do think we could trap it with a thought experiment at least. Okay, so here's what I think. Here's a hypothesis of how this motion might be happening, of the throwing of objects, making of noises, if it is actually caused by a single entity. Okay, so it has to do with physics and time travel a little bit, but it has to do with time dilation. So just a little background of this physics concept, which is fascinating. Basically says that put it in a certain way, it means that travel into the future is possible, and we've already done it, and we could theoretically do it right now if we wanted to. That has a lot of crazy implications, but that is true. I don't think any scientist will bat an eye, especially a physicist. But strange things happen when you go into the future. Who would have known? But this is how you go to the future, okay? If you go incredibly fast, approaching the speed of light, and once again, speed of light, it'll take you 8 minutes to get to the sun. And the sun is very far away. But once you get closer to this incredible speed, you'll experience time dilation. So if you're in a ship and the ship is going this fast, what will happen is that around you, everything will seem normal. You'll be able to walk around. Time will be going in a normal state. But all around you, everything outside that is not traveling this fast will effectively slow down super slow. So here's the end result. You travel 1 year. You spend 1 year in this time dilation state because you're traveling. But everybody around you would have aged 40 years, perhaps. So one of your years turns into 40 years, okay? So, okay, let's add another thing. Another way to get this time dilation effect is not just going really fast, but producing a very large amount of energy. So if you can produce a lot of energy around you, it's theoretical. I'm not a physicist, I'm a biologist, but it's theoretical. You might make a bubble around you, and then that little bubble will experience time dilation. Okay, so what would time dilation look like if you had this device that was producing so much energy around you that you experienced time dilation? Probably what it would look like is I would be moving at a normal speed, but everybody around me would be moving super slow. So if I saw somebody throw a baseball at me, I would see it crawl its way toward my head. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be experiencing this time dilation. Now, if I could do this, I could do all kinds of weird poltergeist things. Like I could easily like stop a punch in midair. I could throw things, pick people up, punch them. And to me, it'll be so easy because they're so slow. But if you're on the other end and you're seeing things flying, it looks a lot like poltergeist activity. I think, like, it just looks so odd. And this might be a possible explanation for that.
No, that's interesting too. And as a biologist, I'm sure you've noticed that. And this gets back to your concept that we spoke about last week, but that will be in the future for people listening to this. The idea that heightened states of arousal in humans will produce excess energy that we can measure physically. For example, your temperature could rise, your heart will be beating faster, these type of things. It's going to change the electromagnetic field that you are generating, and so on. But when you're talking about these, what it immediately made me think of is the hummingbirds. And because
Okay.
I've also often discussed this with people, I'm a bird watcher, and you discuss what's it like a hummingbird looking at us, because they produce these huge amounts of energy in their little bubble, and their metabolism is so much quicker than our own.
Oh yeah. Fascinating. It's fascinating.
Yes, and another thing that strikes me about that, just from my own personal experience, I don't have I developed Hashimoto's thyroiditis. It's an autoimmune disease, so they removed my thyroid. They also removed at that time the parathyroid glands, put them back in, but they didn't take. So I don't have a calcium metabolism that really works.
Okay.
Calcium is what enables your nerves to talk to each other. That's what caused my near-death experience. It's what causes cocaine overdoses. It's what causes milk convulsions in puppies. When you don't have enough milk sickness, when you don't have enough calcium, the nerves can't speak to each other, and it'll mess up your central nervous system. And if it's bad enough, then you can go into convulsions, because of the trouble that your nervous system has performing properly. I was taking a replacement medicine for this parathyroid hormone, which is what allows your body to absorb the mineral calcium, and it got too high, and I had the strangest time experiences. I could see my brain, I could see how time is a construction of your nervous system and your brain, time as we experience it. And it was the strangest thing, because I could still see that there's causality happening in the world, but this whole sense that we normally have of time and it moving more or less at the same pace, the past being in the past, you're in the present here, future hasn't happened yet, was really very seriously messed with because of this disturbance in the whole nervous system that I had. So it gives me a sense that I wouldn't be surprised if, like you're saying, this whole theory that you have different kind of timelines or time settings, let's say, in areas that are close to physical spaces that are close to one another, and where you're close enough to kind of see this other area, but it's working on a different time scale or time setting, that definitely could account for some of these strange incidents.
Yeah, well, those are really two good examples. And I've thought about the hummingbird thing. So I look at the hummingbird, and its world is so radically different than us. It's every second of living, and it moves so fast. It has to drink so much energy.
Yeah.
Its heart is beating so fast. It's like, what is it the normal for the hummingbird? And then the other thing was about the way these things may be moving around in time differently. I hypothesized that one way to do it would be if you had technology, you had a device that could do this. But I could see an organism just having this ability innately. For instance, for example, like an electric eel can produce electricity, and so can man. But the electric eel doesn't need any technology to do it. Its body is a technology.
That's the thing. Is that I think that people because I am interested in, you're coming from the science angle, I've been very interested in that there are models in various esoteric theories that talk about our reality and trying to map those onto some of these strange paranormal experiences to see if it can give us any insight. And, you know, I read, for example, a lot of Dion Fortune, and she, in the kind of Western esoteric tradition, has this idea of, usually it's kind of like a 7-layer model, but the idea is that you have these various states of kind of matter, and that are also kind of states of consciousness. So you have like your bones, which are solid matter. You have your blood, which is, of course, liquid. Then you have, as well, as you mentioned, we are generating and bathing in electromagnetic fields, right? When they take an EKG of your heart, they're looking at that. When they do an EEG of your head or your brain, right, they're looking at the electrical field that your brain is generating. And I think that, you know, we can manipulate our bones and our muscles, and so on. I believe, I'm starting to suspect that certain people may have more control over manipulating their electromagnetic field. I know a lot of people that go through near-death experiences, then you have a lot of problems afterwards with electronics, right?
Yes.
When I still have problems with touch screens now and then. I think partly because I just have dry skin, so I leak out more electricity.
Yeah, sure.
But also I notice that when I'm upset, it gets a lot worse, right? So you kind of learn to moderate that part of yourself as a way to try and have your life be less hectic in this information digital age.
Right.
But
well,
yeah,
I think one of the things you're getting at with your experience with your calcium deficiency and with what we're talking about is that we humans have a certain amount of control of how they experience reality. And it's possible that some have more. But one example that talks what you talked about, that it reminded me of something I really want to get into. I just haven't had the time to get into the technology, but I believe it's available now. Is I just want to buy a visual heartbeat meter so that I have put it on my body and I can visually see a representation of the heartbeat. And then practice controlling that with my mind, my intention, basically. I think that's the beginning of how if you wanted to train yourself to have some of these, to adjust your biology and your perception, that's probably one way to start, is just do something easy, like controlling your heartbeat with your mind.
Yes, I think there's a ton of exercises and, you know, biofeedback and stuff. And I believe that, now I'm going to be super corny, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. But I really encourage people, because the thing is that, you know, I got some of these practices many decades ago, and they have helped me. I've never been one who, well, for a couple years I was, but who spends 8 hours a day meditating, or people that wake up at 4 a.m. so they can meditate in silence, doing zazen with the back completely straight and immobile for 45 minutes every. That's also intimidating. But like you're saying, if you could just find a small way in to just get a practice that you do, you know, 2 or 3 times a day for 15 seconds or 30 seconds, right?
Yeah.
Over time, that will help you and you will make progress. So I would encourage people, you know, if you just think of a small thing and just make a commitment to just do it a couple times a day for a minute or so, it's still going to help you. I think the main thing is consistency over time and just finding a way to kind of get your toe in, you know? So yeah, that sounds like a really exciting, really fun thing to try and do. And it would be interesting to see. I have heard, because I get migraines, or not so much anymore, but I have in the past. And of course, this is another thing. It seems to be happen that you will have blood vessels dilate in the brain, and this causes the whole migraine syndrome to start cascading through your system. So since you only have a limited amount of blood in your system at any time, if you can direct that blood elsewhere in the body, you can have relief, hopefully. So one idea is to constrict the blood vessels in the brain. Another idea is to draw the blood to the extremities away from the brain. And so they will give you like a mood
Yeah.
ring, that material,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
like on
Yeah.
a card. And you can use that to see when you are getting that piece of material hot in your hands, which means that you have directed that blood flow towards your extremities. And I actually have done this practice off and on in the past. It's very helpful, but it's another way of just kind of controlling this, what would be normally an unconscious function of the body, and making it conscious. So, which
Interesting.
is another thing you're doing with the heartbeat, right? Normally that's
Yeah.
completely unconscious uh, aspect, and making it conscious. So,
Yeah.
which
Wow.
ties into poltergeist phenomenon, because one of the main theories is that you have someone who has, for whatever reason, excess energy and a talent for psychokinesis, and this unconscious stuff that they're repressing is coming through in these psychokinetic abilities. So
Yeah.
accessing these unconscious functions in a more conscious way may be a way of helping to tamp this down for people, possibly.
Definitely. Yeah. Definitely get you some relief. That's for sure. Yeah. So I think I'll get into that specific aspect of poltergeist and the high stress levels. But yeah, if you want to get some relief, hey, if you're listening to this and you just need some relief with poltergeist really quickly, put it on the front page right here. You just relax, try to find some balance in your life, go for a walk, get some ice cream, and then come back. so, so yeah. So let me see. Let's go down the line here. Okay, so a little more history. So then, this looks like this is maybe when scholars started looking at the problem. Perhaps there's definitely an early instance. So in the late 19th century, psychical researchers began investigating this poltergeist phenomenon seriously. Okay. So now, what they did, which was interesting, to prevent prejudgment, they used the term poltergeist in an adjectival sense, as descriptive of the type of happenings reporting. So it was a poltergeist disturbance or outbreak. So yeah, so now they're this way of using the term is, I think, the way we'll use it sometimes. But when we talk about poltergeist, sometimes we just use poltergeist outbreak or activity, and it does not indicate a cause. It just talks about the type of activity happening around it, which is physical in nature lots of times. Some other observations. One is that outbreaks do not continue indefinitely. They last only a few days or weeks. So I think this is in general, because I have read accounts of longer, at least month-long paranormal activity of the poltergeist variety.
Yes, some of them go on for much longer. It's highly unusual, but yeah, you can have ones that go on a lot longer, but the general trajectory is very short.
Yeah, and if this is linked to emotions, then I mean, I think it's hard to like maintain any type of emotion for longer than like weeks on end. Any
Yes.
kind of extreme emotion. Apathy, boy, keep that going for decades. But I don't know, these things like that. So then, here's another interesting account going back in history. So now this is in the year 1666 or 1666. So this was Reverend Joseph Glaville. Okay, now he's a scholar and a philosopher, and he published an account on a famous case, and the account was called Drummer of Tidworth, or Tedworth. I'm sorry, Drummer of Tidworth, or sometimes pronounced or said Tedworth. Now, in this account, he had a lot of his own firsthand accounts in a house, and where this happened was it stood on the site of the present Zouchay Manor at Tidworth in Wiltshire. So this is a very old account, and he published it, and lots of people got to read it, and he was very respected at the time. Okay, and now something else I read here was different ideas to describe this. So here's one that was mentioned called the spiritualistic theory. Okay, so this explanation assumed that the poltergeist focus is really a, in quotes, medium, a link or intermediary enabling a disembodied spirit to manifest its presence. So I see two parts to this theory or hypotheses. One part is that there is a disembodied spirit present, manifesting, but then there's also a person, which is referred to as a medium, which is an intermediary. So this is like a two-part explanation, which I guess it kind of goes with what we believe, which is that there's a type called a parasite of these organisms. Parasite described by Paulino. But yeah, with a parasite, you need to have two individuals. It doesn't work with just one. And then in this spiritualistic, they also mention two.
Yeah, the idea is that there is, the way Colin Wilson puts it in his book Poltergeist is that you have someone, a human being, who is, as very worked up, very emotional, generating all this energy, oftentimes in puberty, where of course the organism is in kind of hyperdrive, trying to reorganize itself into the next phase. And he says there's just all this energy around that they don't have control over, so you can have another spirit kind of come over and just kind of do what they want with that energy.
Yeah.
The interesting thing, if I recall correctly, about the drummer of Tedworth is that one of the reasons that became a very famous case was because it was, I'm pretty sure, someone had, I think they'd had like a court case or something that went against this guy who was a drummer, and he decided to curse the people that had wronged him by subjecting them to this drumming day and night, which a bunch of people trudged through the house and listened to a witness. So in that instance, it was a human being consciously deciding to create this poltergeist disturbance. So
interesting. Okay, and now you just touched on this too. So then biological factors play into this as well. So there's a man named Dr. Barry Taff, who was just interviewed on New Thinking Aloud on YouTube with what is the name of? Do you know what the host?
Oh, Jeffrey Mishlev.
Oh, thank you so much, because I really respect this guy, and it just slipped my mind. But yeah, Dr. Jeffrey Mishlev, great guy. He has a show now. Dr. Barry Taff, emphasizing these biological factors, he cites a strong correlation with people with epilepsy and poltergeist phenomenon. Now, you also mentioned here that I like this quote. It says the juvenility of poltergeist individuals. So this is the idea that puberty might have something to do with it in humans. Now, here's a citation from 1930 by a Hereward Carrington. Hereward Carrington.
Yeah, Hereward Carrington, yes.
Hereward, thank you so much. Yeah, so 1930, here's a quote, what he wrote. It's fairly graphic, but let's hear what he has to say. He says, an energy seems to be radiated from the body. When the sexual energies are blossoming into maturity, it would almost seem as if these energies, instead of taking the normal course, find this curious means of externalization. That's what he believes. Now, let's see, there's another part here that has to do with, so this is another aspect or explanation. So this is a little section, I'll read it, I'll just quote it directly. Okay. So this is what A.R. Owen says. This brings us close to the psychological meaning of poltergeistry. I believe that poltergeistry is a, in quotes, working off, a la Bismarck, of emotional tension. There is some reason to believe that it happens by an unconscious process, because the poltergeist person usually seems to have no conscious control over the happenings and only the dimmest awareness that he or she is responsible for the happenings. This suggests that poltergeistry occurs in those most liable to psychological repression, which squares with the fact that many actual hysterics are represented among poltergeist people. Of course, more elaborate features may be superimposed on the process in the form of the manifestation, like the symptoms of hysteria and other neuroses, may be capable of having a symbolic content reflecting the specific emotional issues involved. This theory, while explaining several of the curious features of poltergeistry, of course, sheds no light on the physical nature of the poltergeist force and little on the mysterious age factor. So there's another explanation that is heavily reliant on emotions.
Yeah. Here's the thing. So at this point, I'm going to plug my own blog.
Well, by all means, if you've done
because
it already. Shame on me.
because let's see. Well, first of all, I'm going to get back to John Keel because we were talking last week, bringing up the Mothman prophecies, and one of the things that he noticed in his studies of the paranormal, and it became very amplified in the whole window area and time frame surrounding the Mothman prophecies, the events around that Point Pleasant at that time he was there. He noticed that when he got an idea in his head that he had, for example, noticed a theme or a pattern, that suddenly he'd start getting these examples coming to him in real life. So then he started experimenting with it and coming up with some, kind of wild ass crazy ideas. And yeah, they would come reflected back to him. I don't have my book here at the time and I haven't read it, so I don't have an example off the top of my head. This type of thing has happened to me a lot with, synchronicities, like stupid synchronicities. One time I was obsessed with these cupcakes that I've been eating a lot of pie, and I was obsessed with these cupcakes from this place up in Santa Rosa, which is an hour away. And then I thought that I was going to be able to get some downtown in Napa. I went down there. I was like really worked up thinking about this because I've been eating a ton of sugar and I really shouldn't eat any more sugar, but I was thinking, oh man, those cupcakes are so good. Anyway, so then
I want cupcakes now. I'll get some later.
I know. I have such a sweet tooth. Anyway, so I'm downtown. I'm looking at this pond where these beavers are in Napa. And suddenly there is this drunk, because it's near the VFW hall, and it's like Sunday afternoon, there's this drunk young man coming up, and he notices me. He's like, "Hey, Grandma, you want to come back to my caddy shack?" Then I kid you not, he starts shouting at the top of his lungs, like, "Let's go, Cupcake! Let's go, Cupcake!" And I was so mortified.
Whoa.
First of all, it's a tourist house, and these tourists are looking at me, like giving me this like hard stares, like what I've been up to, and then I'm just like, But that type of thing where it's just like your unconscious stuff is just like coming out in the world is like really embarrassing and everything. But it's another thing where with some of these people that I think that there are these patterns where these you can have a focus who is very worked up and has a lot of extra sex energy, and they're super repressing everything, and that can cause these poltergeist incidents. But at the same time, I think that some of these researchers got kind of hyper focused on that and started kind of not noticing some of the other stuff that's happening. I wrote a blog post on Claudia Ackley, who is a Bigfoot researcher, and she was on a show called Me and Paranormal You with Ryan Singer, which is a really fun show. And he puts out a ton of episodes. Very interesting guy. And anyway, so she is really big on Bigfoot being a real physical phenomenon. She is so into Bigfoot being an actual flesh and blood creature that she is suing the state of California to try and admit this. She's doing this whole legal thing.
Whoa.
However, she is very frank and upfront about conveying exactly what she has experienced. And she has a number of things that she talks about where, for example, at one point, she was with her two daughters, one of whom was in puberty, and they managed to see and photograph a Bigfoot. And she talks about things like, she said at one point, she sees this huge beast running through this leaf litter, but it's not making any noise, right?
Right.
So it has these kind of strange aspects. And then, of course, Bigfoot has a number of things where it's just, the wood, there's a book, publication about them called wood knocks, right? Because you keep hearing these knocks. What do poltergeists do in a house? There's all these knocks. You get bad smells. Even there's the case called the Black Monk of Pontefract. They even had huge footprints going through the lounge of this house in Britain where they were having this poltergeist infestation. So I think that it's a larger phenomenon, and I think that some of this focus, because it's a great theory and it has a lot of appeal because you can like you're saying, you can measure a lot of this energy. You can see the physical changes that are happening to people going through puberty. So it makes kind of a nice physicality to it, along with all the kind of strange happenings.
Right.
Speaking of Jeffrey Mishlove, I really wanted to bring up today his book, The PK Man.
Oh
That he
yes, the
wrote.
PK Man, legendary
Exactly.
case and book by Jeffrey Mishlove. Yeah.
I know, I love that book, and I mean, the Ted Owens was how would we describe him? A wild man and a big old psychic medium and adept. And he was known for being able to do things like people say, "Oh, can you call in a lightning strike?" And he would, even though it's like a clear day. He would manifest flying saucer sightings. He would change the weather. But getting back to, and he caused a lot of this stuff. He would very deliberately had certain procedures that he would go through to cause these type of physical PK type influences. Speaking of emotion, it's funny because I guess, one of the, you have the idea, could I see anything at any point in time? I would love to see, because one of the things that he would do, as you know, is he would influence like football games on the TV and try and hobble one team so the other team could win.
Yeah.
His procedure would be he would lock himself in a room with the TV blaring and a bunch of booze, and he would just be like shouting hexes and curses and just like pointing at the TV, and I guess it would scare his family so much everyone would like leave the house. I would love to see that. But speaking of emotion, right?
Yeah.
Somehow leading to these physical effects. But he also had the classic, knocks, apparitions of scary monsters. I don't know if disembodied voices or not, but you could put a lot of what happens around him down to classical kind of poltergeist phenomenon.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
So I think any type of situation or experiment or thinking about this, you're going to have to acknowledge this kind of wider view than the classical, what I find is a very popular thinking, which I think has a lot to it about, the troubled teen who's super repressed.
Carrie. I mean, it's basically Carrie.
Exactly.
Stephen
And it's all
King,
about sex. Yeah. And honestly, what teen you're going through this? How are you? It's just like your body's out of control. You're going through all this weird stuff and experience all these new emotions, and your brain is suddenly able to comprehend all these things it couldn't, 2 months ago. It's kind of ridiculous to expect these people to not be at a turbulent. It's just a turbulent transition they're going through. So I think they get kind of a bad, let's say, rap.
Yeah, sure. Well, here's something I think in general that I think this is a thought I think that over everything we're talking about today, it sits like it influences what we're talking about. So I think just in general, I believe the human mind is incredibly powerful in its ability to affect reality, and not a lot of people know this. But that plays really big into all this. I think also, I hypothesize that certain people are just innately able to use this. But I do think probably everybody has this ability. They just require immense training and patience to be able to use it for anything.
Yeah, I think so. So is there more on the history to come?
Well, that's it for the historical history. When in our next segment, then we'll talk about some more people like Paul Eno, what he believes. Also some ideas that have been put out by people investigating the Skinwalker Ranch in the Uinta Basin in Utah. But yeah, I think that wraps up about this section. So then I think people will now listen to me give a background on myself and why I became interested in poltergeists. Then I will give my plan on how to trap one, which is only a thought experiment. And then after that, we will discuss it, and then right after I've told you, but then there's going to be another section where we've taken a week to process it. But I'm not going to forget a second time. Check out Stephanie Quick on her blog, okay, which is stephaniequick.home.blog. It's a great blog. And check her out on Twitter. She could be found at Wandering Britches. Let me spell that for you. It's WANDERBRITCHES. SkinBritchz, and that'll be on the video of this podcast. And she's also on Facebook as Stephanie Quick, so check her out. Okay, well, goodbye, everybody. I think goodbye. We'll be back in a little bit. Okay, I guess they're gone now, so we can continue.
I think we're alone now.
They're about to hear some weird stuff. My background is in biology, but I really specialize in animal behavior. And I did spend 1 year as a wildlife trapper. So during that year, I trapped like raccoons, skunks, armadillos, bats, snakes, beavers, nutria.
Nutria?
Yeah, nutria is an invasive species. Rodent. And so that's some of my background, but I really like experimental design. So I like designing experiments. Like I grew up, academically, I went to a university, and I guess the professor, my mentor, he did a lot of I see this now years later, but not at the time, but he just made really clever methods for getting results that didn't involve a lot of money, work, because they were simple, and it's just like, hey, if you have the creativity, you don't need all this equipment, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So then that's the approach that I took, that's the experience and the approach that I took to this Poltergeist thing. Because it's very interesting. The main thing that tipped me over was just like, man, there's just so many accounts over and over again, going back hundreds of years, There's got to be something here. And then very recently, I started listening to Paul Eno and Ben Eno's podcast, Behind the Paranormal, which they just recently put it on YouTube. I think it's been going for decades, maybe.
Yes, it has.
And I just found out about it, they put because it was regional. It's Rhode Island. But anyway, he talks a lot about, he calls them parasites, which I think could be attributed as a poltergeist. And he believes mainly that a lot, if not all, paranormal activity could be explained by multiple realities that are at certain areas or around certain people. They just mix together, and so you get weird things. So we're somebody's weird alien, everybody's alien, and he just goes really into detail, and he explains some experiences. His context put a lot of my experiences, made them make some more sense. Like one time I was in a paranormal hotspot, which is also a biological reserve in Texas, and I'm pretty sure I had a prank call by some aliens. I'm pretty sure 2 aliens prank called me at this research station I was staying in. There was a lot of synchronicities. It was it was December. The articles that came out about ATIP had just come out. Everybody was talking about UFOs. It was the month of December, and there was a UFO sighting a little town over that same month. I saw the video on YouTube. I was wanting to interview the guy, but it was like Christmas time. We just couldn't make it work.
Yeah.
And then my friend who lived in that small town, this was like a one-horse town, she told me about her personal experience with UFOs. She told me a pretty scary story about her mother and grandmother having an encounter with a landed craft a few decades before, in that same area. And then there's a road that's known, very famous. It's got markers on it. It's called the Ghost Road. There's a lot of orbs of light that have been reported there for decades. That's like a tourist attraction. And another really odd thing is that it's a biological preserve. It's actually the first biological preserve in North America. Based on my own research and my collections, there's one. It's broken up into different units, and it's very clever because these units of land can't touch them. It's super rich biological land, but they're connected by corridors. So scientists did is very clever. They saw a big creek or bayou lead from one another, and let's protect all the land around the bayou. So you're effectively you connect as much land as possible, and you make a really large preserve. But of all those units, which stretch the big thicket it's very broken up. It'll take you maybe 2 hours to drive from one end to the other, going 60 miles an hour.
Yeah.
But I collected in most of all of them, and then there's this one unit, which to me, based on my research, it's the most biologically diverse region of an already very biologically diverse preserve.
Yes.
And in that one, there is a modern, I think 2000 sighting of a Bigfoot or a skunk ape. It was down the road. I've been before. Yeah.
I just wanted to add something because you're talking about how this happened. This sighting was in a larger region which is very biologically diverse, and then in the most biologically diverse area of that region. Now, I studied a little bit of ecology in college, and generally speaking, tell me if I'm wrong, you have the most biologically diverse regions where you have various the edges between very different ecosystems, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good point. And
Which
that
is a
actually,
liminal space, or yeah,
yeah,
liminal space. Yeah.
liminal space. Yeah, liminal spaces come up all the time in biology and ecology. It's so funny, but
No, that's
nobody,
an
I mean,
excellent point. Yeah.
biologists are fascinated by them, but they're not like, woo,
Mhm.
weird. They're just like super interesting. Yeah,
Yep.
another liminal space in biology is this very specific area called the riparian zone of a
Yes.
body of water. Yeah,
Hmm.
so the riparian zone is and this is what it's called. There's animals that only live in the riparian zone, but it's the juncture between water and land. So there's like a little strip,
Hmm.
and animals have just adapted to this area, and it's just like definition of the liminal zone. But so yeah, what you mentioned is that so if you this preserve is called the Big Thicket National Preserve, and so if you look it up, one of the first things you'll see is that scientists believe the reason why it is so biologically diverse is because during the last ice age, I believe it's like 5 different ecosystems converged in this one area. So
Uh-huh.
yeah, so yeah, and I see it. There's this one area called the Canyonlands, and you go to the Canyonlands and you just see these tremendous dips in elevation, and then you
Hmm.
go to another area and it's like incredibly wooded, and there's bayous and it's very swampy. You go to another area and it floods torrentially, like during the May rainy season. And then you go to like giant, like there's another area where it's got like a giant river with sandy banks and like kind of like quicksand type environments. You have to be careful if you weigh a lot. I'll just point that out. I had a research assistant, and she was a very petite girl, and I was like terrified. I was like waist deep in the quicksand, and she
Oh no.
wasn't. She was just she was hopping around like a little fairy, and I was like, oh my gosh, she doesn't weigh anything. That's why. And I
Oh
was like,
my
I'm not gonna let
gosh.
her know. I'm not gonna let her know I'm freaking out. I'm dying. She's having a good time. I'm gonna if I get to a point where I'm really in trouble, I'm gonna let her know. But I'm just gonna deal with this myself. I'm gonna suffer in silence. And I got myself out. It was
Oh
like
my
it wasn't
gosh.
like movie quicksand, but it was like, hey, you're stuck, and if you're not smart, you're not gonna get out. About this area.
Not a lot of people can claim that experience. That's pretty funny. That's wild. I'm glad you were fine, but yeah, that could be really distressing.
I got one small discovery out of that. We did collect some beetles on the right on the edge of this quicksand, and they count as a new county record. So this is
No, that's
increasing the distribution. Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah.
one one more thing, going back to this unit that's really diverse
Hmm.
with the Bigfoot sighting, is that just another little point in it is, I mean, I collected insects in all these units.
Hmm.
That's the only unit where I found a new species of beetle. So
Yeah,
it's just
yeah.
giving more biology. So okay, so I was in this area for December, and then I was going to give this prank call story because I think it gives context to Paulino's work, and
Yeah.
eventually it goes back to Poltergeist. So then I received this call, and something was talking to me, and the voice was really hard to tell if it was a male or female. It just didn't sound like a human. I had a really hard time understanding what the hell was going on. Eventually, it was a kind of long phone call. I realized, okay, they're talking in English. Like these are English words, and they have the rhythm, so it has a rhythm of language, but they're just not using any of these words correctly at all. Not like pig
Hmm.
Latin, like they
Hmm.
would just say like random things, but it's hard for me to mimic because the cadence was so perfect. So they
Hmm.
were saying like, cattle, buffalo, 1, 2, 4, 26, red buckets or something, and I was like, oh, okay, what's going on? Then another voice came in. There was another one of these things, and then they started talking to each other. Kind of sounds like about me. And once again, they were doing this weird English language thing, and they were like making fun of me. I felt like I still don't know what to say. And so the whole time I was also like really paranoid. I was really paranoid. These guys kept talking to me. And I was like, man, I am not about to get abducted. That's all I could think about. It was like the middle of the night, one horse town. I was like, I'm
Hmm.
not going to get abducted. I'm not going to let these guys push me around. I was just thinking, this is at the time. I feel differently about the situation. So then I just took hold of the last thing they said to me because they were asking me one question over and over again. And I don't remember what it was, but I'm just going to make something up. It was along the lines of like, red bucket, yellow shoe, red bucket, yellow shoe. They just kept asking me like that.
Yeah.
And then I had enough. And so I repeated that to them. I just remembered that little phrase and I kept repeating it to them. And I got more and more aggressive. I ran outside in the middle of the night and I started shouting it. And I had the phone and I was like walking around the building, the house in the middle of the night. screaming. And there's like owls. I know there was an owl that was perched in front of that place. I know owls have to do with this shit too.
Yeah.
But I know there was an owl that like lives outside of the house because I had heard it several times. But anyway, the funny part is these guys got really quiet. Like I freaked them out, and then they hung up on me. And I was like, yeah, that's what I thought. No one's abducted me. No, sir. But if I put it into context, I mean, they're probably not aliens. I mean, perhaps with Paulino's interpretation, because Paulino has talked to entities and humans that live in a slightly alternate reality to ours. So perhaps they look exactly like us, but the way they speak English is just slightly different. So I believe maybe this was a high strangest incident, and these guys, I don't know, they maybe purposely didn't intend to call someone out of their, dimension. Maybe they call me and they maybe just look like just like us, and they live in a similar world, but they just speak English super weird, and that's all that was happening. At least that's how I interpret it now.
Well, it seems, first of all, that really reminds me, have you ever read Keel's Mothman Prophecies? Very similar to experiences that he had, especially around telephones, just like this weird, garbled, kind of slightly out of sync, out of time, communications. So yeah, that really reminds me of that kind of like slightly off kilter, weird, kind of talking at each other and kind of some coming through. The other thing is it reminds me of some of Robert Monroe's experiences and his journeys out of the body. He had a lot of wild stuff happening, and he is very interesting to this whole idea that there's kind of various realities that you're tuning into, and there's entities, intelligences in other dimensions or areas of space-time, and somehow your attentions collide, because he had a number of experiences where he would like show up kind of as a ghost or that type of thing to other people in other realities, or his future self would come back and be in past selves out-of-body experiences. The other thing is that if you have a particular phrase, of course, with Hellier, Alan Greenfield's Secret Cipher of the Euphonauts has, or is it of the Men in Black? He has the two books, but the secret cipher that he talked about in his books has achieved a lot of prominence. And so according to him, he thinks that in a lot of these contactee situations or UFO incidents that got a lot of publicity or get a lot of publicity, they'll have key phrases like the name of the town or the planet that they, quote, aliens, unquote, say that they're from, that these words can be run through the cipher, and you can see that, use them as pointing towards certain meanings, which may tell you about, for example, future contact locations with these entities, stuff like that. So a guy named Ren Collier has developed some type of computer thing where you can put in your words and then it'll run it through the cipher and come up with other words for you to look at. So I forget the location, but yeah, that might be kind of fun if you to run that phrase and see what you think.
Yeah, I heard about that recently on Strange Familiars with Timothy Renner. So that's really interesting. Yeah, there was so much information there, but if I would have recorded that call, man, it would have been a lot of cool information to go through. But yeah.
It's funny. I love it too. It's kind of like, okay, you want to come at me, I'm going to come back. You even come back at you even strong. That tends to be my reaction to people that come at, because when I talk about, if people don't know, I talk about synchronicities, a lot of weird experiences I've had. And I also talk about sex magic, the erotic aspect of the. So sometimes people get a little shirty about that, and I'll just come back at you, and then usually they'll block me.
Yeah, it's good. I definitely in that situation. But yeah, in other situations, it's like, you got to show like you're not scared, kind of at some point.
Easier said than done sometimes, but yeah.
So there's a little bit of context of why I started thinking about Poltergeist, and then the other big part of it was just information that was leaked by George Knapp and some of the people covering Skinwalker Ranch. So the specific details that were leaked, I think he did it on purpose, probably. I need to go back and find the exact coast-to-coast clip where he says this, but George Knapp, as far as Skinwalker Ranch, the Uinta Basin in Utah, he said, they found out that basically there are poltergeists there, and they do follow you. And then he said, and we know what they like. We know how to get them to follow you based on our experiences. It's kind of an accident. And I was like, well, this is perfect. Like, if you're gonna trap quarry, you need some bait, to get it. And I was like, that's like half the problem right there. So what is it, George Knapp? Freaking tell me. So what he said was, he noticed, or his team, whenever you, as a team of scientists, go there, I think Valet went there. I saw a picture. Valet, I think, was at Skinwalker Ranch. And then Eric Davis was there. What's John Alexander? John Alexander comes into this as well. But so this is describing what a poltergeist is, and this helps the method. So then George Knapp's like, okay, whenever we have security guys, like really tough macho men, women with guns, they'll go to this area, this hot spot, and the poltergeist, which is for what is attracted to them. It'll stick to them. It might have like a really strong initial encounter. And then one individual, he said, went home to his family, and they followed him to his home. He had a wife and at least one child, I think. But it started doing the poltergeist thing, just like throwing things around the house. And then one incident, I guess maybe this might have been like the most intense, the climax was that they went to their front yard, this family, and they saw like a bipedal wolf like leaning against her front tree and just like looked at them. So bizarre, Okay, so I was like, okay, great, that's all we need. We need to just have a tough guy there. We got it. And then now another aspect, John Alexander, the way he describes, I think he's talking about the intelligence in general. In this area, the same thing that George Knapp was talking about, he mentions that it's a pre-sentient. So what I instill from that is that it could probably see the future and past. And so it's really hard to outwit this enemy because, or this quarry, if it's got capabilities you don't. But it's very important that we know this. Now, Paulino also says that Paulino believes that these things are like what George Knapp describes. He thinks they're individual creatures that well, he doesn't use biological, but they're living entities, and they have the ability to go to different times, so they could exist at several different times. Because it seems like humans and other animals probably have a very limited scope of time and how we perceive it. And it seems like there's evidence that other organisms might not have this limitation, and they take advantage of it. So that's important. So this thing, we know what attracts it. We know that it could go forward and back in time. So that's important. Paulino has also said that these things seem to feed on negative energy. So if people are going through high stress situations, it likes it. I'm not sure. I mean, these are all hypotheses. I don't know if it's actually eating it. It could just be a weird correlation. But I also can see how if this entity, this parasite or poltergeist, if it really does like this negative energy, I can see how it has the capability to generate it. It can scare you. So it makes sense.
Yeah.
Just from a very practical standpoint, I mean, when you get highly elevated, I think this goes for sex as well, there are real, like, non-disputable changes that happen. Like, you do generate more energy. Just like, if I were to get super stressed, there would be more heat given off by my skin. That's just a real amount of energy that is going. My heart would beat faster. That's like more motion. So, yeah, highly elevated states do produce more energy. Is that what they're using to feed? I don't know. Okay, so then I think that's the background. So this is what the plan would be. And like I said, I'll tell you now, this is maybe my second time telling somebody this. I told my friend who's a medical doctor, but we mainly just went we went through a lot of ethical discussion and like safety discussion.
Yeah.
That's all we got into. And I do have some conclusions. I do think it's like, this is very dangerous. If we were to do this, it would be like, so this is more like just to get people thinking.
Thought experiment.
It's a thought experiment to generate ideas. But I think if this plan were to be implemented, I think it'd be as dangerous as trying to capture like a live tiger, polar bear, tiger shark, or perhaps as dangerous as all three combined.
I think that, first of all, it's really nice to hear someone actually talking about like, I want to say experimental design, thought experiments, ethical considerations, because a lot of people, actually this came up in the Hellier documentary recently, which is that the people involved in 2012, I think, decided to take a guy and have a hypnotist try and induce a false alien abduction scenario in this guy. And the guy's like, sure, I'll go for it. So they had him sign away. I'm like, what the heck are you thinking? And of course, the guy, he ended up being a good subject and I think a good hypnotist. And he ended up with, kind of PTSD symptoms, I think, as I understand it, from this, and he's had a really rough time with it. And it's like, well, yeah, it's like, and the thing that's aggravating to me about that is that I understand there's always constantly new people coming into developing an interest in these topics. And a lot of the first, if you start getting involved, a lot of the initial information that you're going to run into is sensationalized and just false clickbait, stupid stuff that's not very well thought out. And but at the same time, I would encourage anyone with these type of interests, before you just start running off cock doing stuff, to try and dig deeper into these issues. Because, for example, in hypnotism and the whole alien abduction, memory retrieval and stuff, there's been a big controversy about, messing with people's minds in this way, especially if you don't know what you're doing, you're not a professional. Since 1988, I think, the British UFO Research Association banned hypnotism in their investigations, because concerns for people's mental state and mental health. I mean, when you, generally speaking, you have a big encounter with some type of other or alien, for example, a UFO, it alters your state of consciousness. And I think a lot of people have a big problem coming back to kind of consensus grounded reality afterwards. So if you hypnotize them, it's just going to stir that up and make it worse. And possibly, make it more difficult for them to get back to saying, okay, this is happening on this mental level or emotional level or paranormal level, but this is the, grounded reality, which we all, if we're living here in the body, you need to have a proper relationship with the physical. And I think that's part of what happens to people in shared reality. After these very challenging experiences, is that you have a hard time relating properly to the world around you, because you're just subject to all this input from these more arcane channels or subtle channels, shall we say. But anyway, it's very refreshing and encouraging to hear that you are talking about this stuff. And I think it's really exciting. I'd love to hear what you and your friend had to say about it, because I think it's a neglected aspect of this whole field, but it's really important. So.
Yeah, I'll say right now, my friend, he was like, no, its current form. But we decided, it was like, hey, its current form, if we were to go forward, we just know too little information. It's way too risky. But let's discuss it with some other people and refine it, and then maybe we'll talk. This is another thing as far as how I see what you think about this analogy for how to view working with the paranormal. I mean, it's fine to read about the paranormal, but if you're actually going to try to immerse yourself in contact with the paranormal, I see it as like electricity, okay?
Yep.
You know what? Electricity is dangerous, but there are electricians out there, and you have so much training, they know exactly what they're doing, and they know what the risks are, and we allow them to work with electricity. But if you're not an electrician, I mean, I wouldn't go playing with raw electricity. I wouldn't, tap into it. I wouldn't go to a power line, and you're going to get killed really quickly. You just don't know, but you could learn all you want about electricity. You could read all these books on it and listen to people talk about it, imagine what it's like, and you could even enjoy electricity, but you're just not going to purposely try to do research or deal with raw electrical power,
Yeah.
because it's very dangerous. Yeah. So then this is how it would work. And so this part, let me tell you how you'd like to receive the information. Okay, so I could, because there's 2 layers to it. Okay, there's a huge layer of deception. So I have to give you one full layer and then the other. But that's the question. Do you want me to tell you just like the superficial level first? This is what the poltergeist will be experiencing, and then when I'm done with that, I start again from the beginning and tell you exactly what's going on? Or do you want me to tell you what's really going on, and then at the end, and then like interdisperse the superficial? What do you think would be easier for you to grasp this information? Because another thing, this is like me describing like a spy plan, because I feel like since these organisms are as smart or more intelligent than humans, it's just counterintelligence works at this point. So it's like I have to tell you this heist. It's kind of complicated. So how would you like to hear this information, do you think?
However you want to tell it. I have to say, my training in college was in archaeology, and so it has a big how do I want to say, overlap with detective work, which because a lot of it is you're looking at how the trace of human activities on the material environment. But of course, there's always this element of trying to backtrack and figure out motivations and meanings and communication, that type of thing, behind these material traces. So however you want to go for it is fine by me.
Okay, well, I'll do it the more theatrical way.
That sounds fun.
Okay, so yeah, this is what I'll do is I'll tell you what the poltergeist will see, and then when I'm done, I'll tell you what's actually happening. Okay, so what's going to happen is I'm going to get a team of biologists to go to a paranormal hotspot to collect insects. But we're going to know about the paranormal stuff, so we're like, hey, let's just hire security just in case, you know. So we're going to hire a security person, maybe several security personnel. I'm going to go to this area, and you know what? These security personnel are going to be like tattoos and like, I don't know, have a bunch of guns or whatever the fuck. They're going to be really tough, you know. And then I think unfortunately what's going to happen is that maybe one of these guys or gals gets infected by a parasite poltergeist that follows them back to his house, where this individual, him or her, lives with his or her husband or wife, their partner. And I feel like this thing is probably going to stay there for maybe years in that house, and it's just going to wreak havoc on his family. And it's going to be contained in this house, you know. The family, unfortunately, they're not going to have a lot of support, and there's just the life is going to just deteriorate really horribly. Yeah, so I think that's what's going to happen. And then on the other end, I mean, I really don't care about these guys anymore. I feel sorry for them. I think about them every now and then, but I have my biology. I cared about the biology and whatever. It's just like typical corporate, you know, like mindset. I just don't care. So that's what I hope happens. Okay, I know that sounds weird, but that's like what I hope happens. And that's what I think that's what I hope the poltergeist will see during this long experience. You know, I'm talking about years experience.
Yeah.
Okay, but so what's really going to happen? So this is what's really going to happen is that I'm going to hire an actor, you know, a couple basically, whatever sex or age. But I have to explain to them like, hey, you know, you're an actor. You know, you're going to play a role, and this is a project that's going to involve several decades, and it's going to put you in immense danger. And we're going to be tricking this thing, and you have to be okay with that, you know. And these are the risks. And honestly, we'd have to support these people throughout their life with like health insurance and psychiatric help. It's just a price you pay for this type of work. But if you find these individuals, then the goal is to have one individual. We're going to say, this is what we're going to do. Okay, we're gonna start before we actually trap this entity. We're actually going to like pre-game like a year beforehand, because we need to build a past, a present, and we need to build a future, because this thing we hope to catch is going to be able to access the past in the future. And if we don't have a successfully structured past and future, then I think this whole thing might not work. We have to trick this thing. So the first part of acting is like maybe a year beforehand, you're going to act like you meet your partner at a coffee shop, and you're going to fake fall in love with them, have dates. You're going to fake buy a property together and fake make it your home, put fake pictures in it. You're fake going to live in it and like have an argument. And but it's all fake. You're just acting, you know, but you just got to play it like for real, because you got to imagine somebody's going to be coming here and looking at you. It hasn't happened yet, but I guess it is happening right now. So strange. And then also at the end of this whole experience, you're going to have to eventually, we're not going to do it yet, but we know we have a date set in the future and we're going to complete it. We know we're going to have you break up, sell the house, tear it down, and move away. Okay, we have to do that. We're planning for it to happen. Maybe it'll happen in 10 years. You know, we're just going to write it down, and we have to do that. And we know it's going to do. We're committing that we're going to do this so that we have a future. The future of the story is that this poltergeist wrecks your family, and you separate, and you go about your own ways, and this land is condemned, and you just build a parking lot on it or whatever. But and then but the time that you're living in this fake house, this is going to be this is the house is going to be the prison this thing lives in. Okay, because it's not going to know it's captured, you know. And this is really a trap. It's going to be captured because it has all these abilities. We can't make a physical trap like with bars. There's no material that I think can hold it. It has to be a psychological trap. Like this thing has to be like, it has to be trapped and not know it's trapped, basically. It's a psychological game.
It has to be so attracted to what is happening between these actors that it doesn't want to go anywhere else.
Exactly. And then the way we study it is we're going to have a bunch of hidden cameras in the house, but the couple is not going to acknowledge them or know that they're. In fact, the couple's going to have their own sets of cameras that are the superficial layer cameras, and they're always going to be trying to capture this activity, but they're not going to be able to because the poltergeist is so tricky, you know. But hopefully the poltergeist doesn't know that there's a hidden set of cameras that it's not aware of. And if the couple ever like finds those cameras, then we want them to act weird, you know, like they got to keep the act up the whole time because this thing can go nuclear really fast, nuclear meltdown really fast if this thing finds out halfway through what's happening. So you have to have a contingency plan. But now it also sounds like it may be very tiresome to have this family in the house for decades. Well, I've thought of maybe a simple method to do this, so you could contain it for like several months without having to pay actors. So we could have them like let's just say this is good. This is where it gets. I know I'm about to say this is where it gets weird. I think we've already passed weird, but let's say the couple is in their. They've trapped this poltergeist, you know, and they're like, look, you want to have like a little rest period so the actors aren't always there, or you want to switch out actors. I think all you do is the couple's like, you know what, I'm feeling so sleepy. You know, I could sleep for months, and then the other couple is like, yeah, me too. I could sleep for months or even years. And you have them lay down in bed, okay, and go to sleep. And then you have like a little trap door that opens up underneath, you know, and they slide in there, and then you put in a dummy to replace them. I know this sounds weird, but I think
It won't work.
Right. Don't make a big deal about it.
It won't work.
You don't think it'll work?
No, because that part won't work because, first of all, yes, obviously this is completely unethical and would require an immense amount of resources, but it's a very interesting thought experiment, which I think could end up, I don't know, I'd have to, as it were, sleep on this and think about it, but I think it has some interesting ideas about working with these type of entities to try and learn about them. I know a person who had they had a kind of an NDE. They were at home and had a heart attack, and they were conscious, but it still affected them. Anyway, they were so grateful to the emergency medical technicians that were with them, and afterwards, this person was really concerned with wanting to thank this EMT person, but they didn't know their name and their physical, legal name. So they were very frustrated, very upset because I thought, they just were so grateful and they really felt an incredibly strong drive to connect with this person and express their gratitudes. Okay, so weeks, months later, they are out and about in town and they see this person, they recognize that it's the EMT, and they have this very heartfelt exchange with them, expressing their gratitude, and the other person is just, really sweet about it, and so they have this great, they were able to achieve their goal of connecting with this person and having this exchange with them. But they had forgotten to ask their legal name, so they still didn't know their name, but they were able to find this person because of the energetic connection, the energetic signature. And that's what the poltergeist is going to be honing in on. A certain kind of energetic, emotional, psychological configuration that is with this relationship and this situation that's feeding them. Gotcha. So, yeah, so that is what I would think is a flaw in that plan. But yeah.
What about this slight modification? What if you like, instead of swapping the person with a dummy, you swap them with a double, another human being, kind of similar, whatever. So it's still alive, picking up the role.
Yeah, but they'll still tell that, you can tell one human being from another. Poltergeist would definitely be able to. They follow people around all the time. How I would play it, since this is a thought experiment, how I would play it is, have the big fight that is just too stressful. I can't cope. I have to go and blah, blah, blah. And they leave and, go someplace else.
Okay, and then come back maybe? Or
and then, come back, or, you could play act some other, that the other person who's left behind goes on Tinder and meets someone, or whatever.
Yeah, it's going to be real.
Or they have a quote,
Hallmark movie.
Or they have a quote in parapsychological investigator, unquote, who comes by and gets real interested in the whole thing. You could have various people coming through for whatever. Yeah.
That makes sense. And then something else I was going to say was, okay, here's just another. Okay, so now, what I would do with this, once I trapped it, I would really want to. Then I would just want to record information in secret. And I would just want to study it, like study its habits. If the video, what do you think about the camera thing, the double camera system, where we have hidden cameras that the poltergeist wouldn't know, and then the family members do know about it, but they're not acting like they know about it. And then you have the other cameras. Do you think that might help in tricking this thing into showing up ourselves?
I think it would be worth a try. What I would do is I would inform the actors from the consent angle
Yeah, of
that
course. Yes.
they're going to be recorded all the time, but
Yeah.
but you're not going to let them know about everything. And I would not even let them know that you're putting cameras in, where you're putting them in. I would put in video, like visual devices, audio devices, just whatever type of thing, magnetometers or whatever, but
Gotta
put them
have a
here and
magnetometer.
there. But I would not even let the people know that you're putting the people in the house. I wouldn't even let them know that you're putting that second layer in there.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, because then they if they don't know, they can't let the
Right.
poltergeist know.
Okay, so another thing is Paulino, you mentioned the intelligence thing. Paulino does say something interesting. He says that he believes there's different intelligences. He says some of these poltergeists are super intelligent, and some of them aren't, so you're right. So, and I have no idea on how to trap one or the other, and I don't know how to tell if it's smart. So it looks like he's saying there's a range. So maybe some of them are very animalistic, maybe like a dog, maybe less intelligent, but some of them seem to be more intelligent than humans. So there's a whole spectrum. So you're right. So but we'd have to plan for the smartest one, not for the dumbest one in this thing for it to work.
Yeah, I think you'd have to plan for, because you're basically, just putting the bait out there, and you don't really know, especially, if this is a type of experiment that hasn't been performed before, what you're going to be, attracting. I really think that the whole idea of, I don't want to say, planning it out, the kind of the past, future, and present, I really like that idea. Have you read anything by this guy named Eric Wargo? He has a blog called The Night Shirt, and he just published a book recently called Time Loops.
Oh, I heard all his I heard a bunch of his podcasts, interviews for the book, but I haven't read the book. So I do know what he's talking about, and I know the stories he talks about.
Yeah, I think that this sounds like a kind of a fascinating experiment from that angle, which is that you're seeing that these entities kind of come from a place that seems to have it be outside of time as we know it. Let's see, there's parts of ourselves, as far as like the standard Western human at this part, where like your dreaming life, your unconscious may have access to these future and past states in the present, but it's hard for us to access that.
I have an example of that he even mentioned in one of his podcast interviews. But apparently, a lot of Americans had this. So basically, there was this one morning, I had my alarm set to a radio, so it's going to wake me up with the radio. And I remember very vividly the dream I had that morning was like I was in a building and it was like burning and it was on fire. I was like, oh my gosh! And then my alarm wakes me up for that day, and the first thing I hear was the radio person say, hey, a second plane has just hit the World Trade Center, And apparently, this had such a big impact that so many people, what they were dreaming they weren't actually in the event. They were just dreaming of how they were going to feel after they heard about the event, all their emotions processing it. And that's what informed them before they knew about it. Kind of like what happened with me.
Yeah. And so I think that that this thought experiment that you constructed is very interesting from that angle. I don't know. I've corresponded with Eric Wargo a little bit behind the scenes, and he's I love reading his work. It's so fascinating because I'm very interested in synchronicities. I've had a number of premonitions, wide awake, dreaming, and I can't completely buy into his theory, but he has this. It's just so thought-provoking the way that he writes about this, and he has a number of fantastic examples. So if anyone's interested, go read The Night Shirt or look up Eric Wargo. But yeah, I like that whole idea of kind of setting up a whole, well, if you were doing, let's say, high ritual magic, this would be the part where you are kind of making your astral be similar to making your astral temple, right? Except for it's like through like the long temple, right? Through time.
Yeah.
So you're constructing this structure on the astral in the area of the kind of collective imagination.
Yes.
And then working with that as a place to trap the poltergeist in that.
It's something else that I just thought of from this conversation. Your input is something else I could plan for in the future to happen is I could plan for an event where we're celebrating because this experiment went perfectly, and be like, yeah, in the future we know what's going to happen. We're just planning it. We're like, yeah, you're like you said, our astral body projection for the future is like, we're gonna have this great party. It's gonna be like, oh my god, wait, but now that I think of it, that'd be hard because we don't want this thing to know we're celebrating we captured it. So maybe that's like a different layer. That's like our subconscious thinking that maybe that's just the people behind the scenes are thinking that, not the actors involved. They're not thinking like, yeah.
Yeah, this is why this could be a really fun how do I want to say crowdsourced thought experiment for people to take in a bunch of different directions and just kind of write out their own scenarios or plans about this. So what do you plan to do with this poltergeist after you have trapped it? How do you plan to take apart the experiment at the end?
Okay, right. Well, first of all, the way I thought about it was like, look, I mean, if we're really going to do it right, we'll probably have to make like a fake community to live in, like, or it's just like a single house in the woods. It's going to be a large area, like a radius, like, where it's either controlled. It's like you're setting off a bomb, you don't, it's dangerous. So we have to have a very large, the larger the better. If we could have a whole fake city, small size city, that's great. Or, like I said, we buy some isolated land or something, if that's part of the story, and it's just like in an out of the way area. So that's one thing. We'll definitely have to consider that. We don't want to put any bystanders in danger. And as far as ending it, woof, man, that's a good question. I'm glad you're asking me this before this is done, because if you were asking me this after it's been started, I'd be in some hot water because I really don't have the great answer.
You really would be.
Yeah, because I mean, if we plan for them to break up and then dismantle their lives, okay, well that puts an end to that. But that's no guarantee at all that this thing's not going to follow either or actor and just continuously persist forever. Although Paulino does talk about scenarios where, like, hey, once these people just, the cure for this, a lot of holy men and women, they're the people that get called for these type of things. They say the cure is like, hey, just resolve whatever stress is happening. If these actors are good enough actors and they get a good enough payday, well, then maybe they could just wish it away or just be happy. Another thing, okay, we'll come back to this because this is an important question, but I also want to mention one of my goals. I'm very curious to see if these guys can also run on high levels of positive energy, like high forms of elation, because I'm feeling like, okay, maybe it's just the intensity of the emotions, just like Monsters, Inc. by Pixar Disney. They really love that. I love that movie as far as paranormal movie for kids. I'm like, wow, it's got a lot of cool ideas in here. But in Monsters, Inc., they actually scare people, and that generates energy, and they power their city. With monsters power their energy with the fear of children. But what if these things can also feed off of like super positive emotions? But the reason they don't often do that is because those are maybe more short-lived, and also it's probably super hard for them to generate those emotions, and it's very easy for them to generate the negative emotions. If you're an invisible entity that's super unhuman, possibly, and you could just, well, because a lot of things, the trickster element, a lot of times you start off like doing tricks. But sometimes I'm thinking like, okay, maybe they're trying to make these people laugh. They're like, isn't this funny? Look what I could do, But instead, people are like, oh, I'm terrified. And they're like, well, I guess I'll play to the room. It's like, I'm reading the room. You're not getting the jokes. That's fine. That's fine. We'll go the other way. Let me just scare you. So I'm like, well, what if we could just generate like super positive energy? I just want to see what happens. Like, can we switch this thing to a diet of positivity? That'd be really great.
Well, that's the thing, because if you take one of the things that I'm interested in personally is that, like you're saying, people think poltergeist, they think scary, they think, oh no, this is, this horrible, scary thing that means that this family is like super screwed up and blah, 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 which can be true. At the same time, if you have all these like weird bilocation apports happening, strange lights in the sky, trances, all this stuff that's happening, but it's to a young Catholic girl who is known for doing good deeds, oh, look, it's a saint, and this is all beautiful, right?
Yes. Yes.
So I think a lot of it comes down to interpretation And how do I say? Because a lot there do tend to be these instances of erotic romantic love where people have very intense physical sensations of sexual sensations, but also feelings of romantic love, telepathy. They really feel like they're in contact with these disincarnate beings, which could be like a dead person. It could be, there's this one instance from like the 15th century or something of an abbess, right? Catholic abbess headed up this nunnery. When she was 12, she attracted the attentions of a gnome, and he married her, and they stayed married through all their life. She kept it on the QT. But when the church authorities found out about it, of course, it's scandalous because she's supposed to be a celibate nun and an abbess. However, there's so many miracles occurred around her that they had to say, well, I guess it's cool.
Oh.
But this is the thing where it comes down to interpretation, and it's something in that aspect you could see where somehow her relationship with this spirit husband, let's say, resulted in her being able to improve, to cause positive things to happen around her. So it could be, you could see that, you could interpret that as just a poltergeist who is, instead of setting things on fire, is like, helping heal people and stuff, creating these other material manifestations.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
I like that. And I also have the perspective that, like I said, well, I haven't said it directly, but maybe with my background, like I see these things as just like a different form of life with just different capabilities. But what's interesting is that they're not really alien. I mean, if we're interacting with them, well, I'm sorry, but they're part of human ecology. Like they're just radically different than us in a lot of ways. But they're as much a part of our world as you or I are. They're here, and
yeah, I think so. It's the other thing that's interesting to me. I was reading this book by Montauk Chia on Taoist sexual alchemy practices, and getting back to the whole idea of like you're talking about a couple. The whole idea there is to have these practices, subtle energetic practices that harmonize the couple to each other and balancing them out between them two selves. You're balancing, in kind of like the Jungian sense, you're balancing your anima or animus, resolving these things, which is supposed to have many benefits. But one of the benefits, and I guess that this is in certain strains of kind of tantric or Tibetan sexual practices as well, the idea is that you can then become kind of a locus for the couple who have had this resolution. It can kind of become a locus for bringing this type of beneficial energy to the community, use it as a blessing or specifically to try and help in particular instances, which I think is also interesting from the viewpoint of the whole poltergeist thing, and working with a positive energy as opposed to negative energy of feeding. Sometimes I wonder if they come in feeding off the energy of conflict, and then maybe, like you say, it could be attracting an entity that is interested in that type of thing or used to working with that type of energy, likes that energy, or it could be that the entity is just kind of mirroring back or amplifying in a certain way.
Of course, co-creation is so big in this kind of stuff, and it makes sense. Well, see, co-creation happens in like biology. You have like animals that they develop a similar body plan. Like a penguin, it looks like a lot like a fish. So that's not really co-creation, but it's something happening that looks a lot the same, but it's unrelated. But then
convergent evolution.
Yeah, there you go. And then there's other animals that just adapt to become camouflaged, so they look like a plant. So that's like a co-creation. So it happens all the time. I mean, and then see, the other thing I wanted to mention about these things is that I guess we should talk about what Barry Taff, is that his name?
Oh yes.
I only recently heard about him, but what a character! Love this guy. There's some issues with him. I understand now. It was hard for me to see because I'm a man. But but anyway, Barry Taft, what he describes in a lot of detail is that I don't know. I want to need to your interpretation, but the way I interpret it is that he didn't seem to describe. He described the classic poltergeist activity, called it poltergeist, I think, but he didn't indicate that it was an entity. He talked a lot about what attracts these things, like if people are I'm sorry, I cannot pronounce the word. If they have epilepsy,
Epileptic, yeah.
yeah, that's one of the things, and a couple of other things. But my question to you is, do you think he's describing a physical entity? And if he's not, I interpret this as like, okay, well, poltergeist activity manifests itself in different ways. Sometimes it might be caused by an entity, sometimes it can't. But this is also happens in science all the time. You have multiple phenomenon that are very similar. Just like I mentioned, the evolution of the body shape of a penguin and a fish.
Yep.
That's a phenomenon, but they're not really related to each other. So it could be that both are correct, Barry Taft and Paulino. So yeah, what do you think?
I think that, well, but when it comes down to it, it's like such a huge topic, and there's so much that we don't know. However, I would say that I think that poltergeists, well, let's see, these type of physical phenomenon can come strictly from a human being. They can come from discarnate entities. I think that they come through various mechanisms, a lot of which we don't really know about. I know, it's kind of funny, I was thinking, I used to get a lot of poltergeist knocks coming off me when I was younger, but it calmed down the last decade or so. But I guess it was about a year and a half ago, I was going to be on a podcast for the first time, Shattered Reality with Roseanne Farusha. That's an excellent podcast, a lot of academic researchers, and she has a lot of people that you don't hear about very often, and she's a very thoughtful researcher. So I was going to be on there to talk about some of my experiences. I was super nervous because, you know, one of it was like a missing time experience I had that was like in broad daylight when I was walking down the street, where I saw like a gnome type person, and it looked like it was about 45 minutes ago. So it's like it didn't even have like a UFO to hang my hat on. You know, it's kind of like, okay.
Hey, you got to know him, though. You got to know him.
Got to know. I didn't get him to marry me, though, but oh well. I'm probably not pure enough. But anyway, so I was super nervous that I knew the day it was going to come out. I was really nervous, and I was sleeping on the couch here at my mom's house, and it's kind of arts and crafts style, so it has a lot of wood. And I just had a burst of nerves, and it was like about 20 knocks, like at this couch. I was like, that hasn't happened in a while. And I don't think that had anything to do besides just me getting worked up and having this energy flow off me.
Yeah.
But other times, I think there's good reason to believe that it could be due to another human being or some other type of discarnate entity of whatever type. So I really think going case by case, and as you say, trying to kind of have various models to put on the facts as you can get them and see what can come up. I am hoping to speak with Nish of Nox Mente. She was on Conspiranormal recently. They had a swap cast, and she talked about she had a relationship for a while, a sexual relationship, but she calls it a demon, some other outside entity. Okay. And it was interesting. People can go and listen to it. It's more towards the front of the show. And I thought it was, and I really wanted to speak with her because, of course, I'm fascinated by this type of stuff. And a lot of people won't talk about it because like the whole thing is like what demon, what stuff, what you banished it, what you were having doggy style. I mean, what?
Yeah, it gets weird. People, real quick, like reason why paranormal isn't taken seriously a lot, and this is a good technique if you want to, a government can use this. It's just like, if you're just so crazy, you know, if you're just so crazy, you sound so crazy, nobody's even going to like think twice about you. Yeah. And I feel like the paranormal gets away with a lot of stuff. It's like, you know what, there's some real stuff happening, but let's also just be really like radical, just so zany that nobody will take it seriously.
Exactly.
So an example of how that could be used is like, let's say another government, let's say us, let's be fun. Let's say we're going to invade Australia, and we're going to take all their ruse. But what we're doing is we're going to attack, and we're going to send people in there, but we're going to dress them up like aliens, and they're going to just have fireworks and crazy like outfits, and like they're going to shoot out balloons.
Yep.
And then that's how we're slowly going to take over Australia. People start reporting these things, and like uh, the state things are right now, people will just laugh at it, and they'll be like, "Yeah,
Exactly.
that's
Yep.
what's happening." Next thing you know, we got all the
Hmm.
ruse.
Yep. But
Yeah.
anyway, so the one of the reasons I would like to talk to her is that she had this relationship, and then she noticed that it was correlated with a lot of chaos and negative things that she wasn't appreciating happening in her own life. So she decided that she wanted to cut it off, even though, sexually, I guess it was very satisfying. Um, and she managed to banish this entity.
Mm.
So I'm very interested in, how she put it together, that, what the experience was like, how it started to infiltrate into her life, how she started to notice the entity, that type of thing. But then also how she, because I know that there's many people that have these things and they freak out, which I think makes it worse, but it's difficult to not freak out. And some of this stuff, keeping her nerve is like, can be very difficult. But then to see, what procedures did she use to get rid of this entity? Because I think a lot of people would find that information very helpful. So, and it could have a bearing on your thought experiment here too. So,
Yeah. Okay, so two things. You just gave me an answer, possible answer with your story you just told me of how to end this experiment.
mm-hmm.
And also, you brought up a point that I think about all the time. I think is important. Is why it's important for people to study the paranormal and take it seriously is because I think it's real, and a lot of people suffer because of it, and there
Yes,
needs to be help for them. And
yes,
so, if we take it seriously and we listen to them and we try to understand it better, sometimes it could be
yeah.
prosaic. It could be very prosaic, but if you don't look, you don't try to help somebody, then nothing good's going to happen. So I think that's important. That's an important reason to do paranormal research in itself.
No, for me, that has to be the main root of it is, because you say people are suffering. Sometimes it's physical stuff. A lot of it is psychological, emotional, or even ontological, other stuff. But yeah, I think that, because I know with me, there was things that happened when I was younger, and I thought, I really wish people would have talked about this. But then it's so weird. I don't want to talk about it. So,
Right,
so
right.
recently I've started opening up about it, and I hear from people that are like, oh wow, I didn't know this happened to other people, and sometimes even just realizing that it's a shared experience, that you're not some super freak out there, um
Yeah,
not to put down freaks, but it can just be enough, I think, lots
yeah,
of times. So yeah,
yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, I'm glad. Yeah, we believe that. And I don't hear that often in the
me
paranormal
either.
community.
Yeah.
Not often enough for sure. And then, okay, so then a possible solution is let's just play this out. Okay,
Hmm.
so we plan for in the future this couple will eventually realize it's poltergeist activity, and they'll take steps to end it. So they'll call in an expert, like a clergy person, and then
Hmm.
they make a ritual where they realize that they have to come to peace with their relationship and who they are,
Hmm.
and maybe they just banish it with
Hmm.
like some sage, and it's just like a little ceremony, and then they decide that they're going to go off and live their own lives. Like we're going to break up, we're still
Hmm.
going to demolish the house, we're going to build it down, but you know what? We're really happy with each other and we're good friends. And maybe they just call each other every
Hmm.
2 years for the rest of their lives, just one time and talk for 30 minutes, and maybe that's enough to keep it away. But that's a
Yeah.
possible thing,
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I don't really know. It was funny when I was listening to Nisha's story and she talked about banishing it, and I realized, like, I don't really know basically the first thing about banishing anything.
Right, right. Me neither. I've never had to.
Well, I
No.
actually, okay, here's a weird, actually, I'm thinking in the next maybe few minutes, I should probably uh, get on to the other aspects of I gotta say, I love your experiment. It's like a really interesting thought experiment, and I'm very interested to think about it more and hear what other people have to say. Then I'm going to tell you now that actually I lied when I told you I have no experience with banishing anything, because
Oh,
when I was in my mid 30s, I lived at a Tibetan Buddhist meditation center for a couple years, and
okay.
I did a lot. I went and sat in meditation. I was dating this lady who ran a sweat lodge every month. I was doing like small groups. If I was like really kind of like, okay, I'm gonna like really dive in. So this lady who ran the sweat lodge, also she had like we were doing a kind of a small study group on some new thought texts and progressive relaxation, stuff like that. There was a woman in this group who was, I think, in her late 30s, early 40s. She was married and had a young daughter, and she had terminal cancer.
Okay.
And, you know, it was just horrible because she was young and obviously she wanted to stay with her husband, but she really wanted to be there for her daughter, and it was not happening. So
Yeah.
she was very ill. I noticed that when we'd have these group things, it's like a lot of people, they'll, you know, if you're doing like laying on of hands or energy work, that type of thing, they'll kind of have a certain modesty or moderation to it, where they're kind of like, okay, they're considered the person performing, you know, like the yang person, right? They're not just going to soak up endless amounts of energy because they realize that it's a gift from this other person. She did not have those type of stops. She was just basically out for, you know, staying alive as long as she could for her own personal reasons, which are understandable, but it's not, I mean, at a certain point you got to accept, you know, what the writing on the wall, as it were, since we're talking about poltergeists who are known for writing on walls. Anyway, so she died.
Oh, wow. Did I
Yeah.
see that coming? Okay.
Yeah. After that, I was living in my room in this place, and I would get the most horrifying smell of rotting flesh at odd times and feel her presence and feel that neediness, that aggressive neediness.
Yeah.
Which was super creepy. I gotta say, I was reading this other thing from Windbridge Institute. They did a study, a longitudinal study of these various psychics, and the one young woman had a real hard time with her mediumship abilities, seeing dead people. And her first experience had been as a young girl, where she saw like a pirate standing there, kind of decomposing in this huge smell of rotting flesh. So they were talking about things that the people around her could have done to provided her with, so it wouldn't have been so traumatic. But I got to tell you, I was a grown ass woman. I had, you know, plenty of people around me who were very adept, and that still is just uncanny, and it's a horrible experience. Like that. I don't know that I think that little girl would have still had problems just because the experience itself was horrible. Anyway, I had a very strong feeling that it was her. And so I just basically tried to make psychic contact and just told her, look, you just got to, I don't care. I don't know if I can prevent you from going anywhere else, but you need to get the hell out of here. I burned a bunch of incense, and luckily she left. My feeling is that she was probably going to other areas to see what she could do. But it was, yeah, so I banished a vampire, if you want to look at it that way.
That's awesome. It's a
But
horrifying experience as well.
I felt the horrifying part to me was you can't fault her for wanting to be young and dying like that with a child and a husband is the most horrible thing. I couldn't fault her. I mean, all you can do at that point is try and shut the door, right, between the living and the dead. But I couldn't fault her, you know?
Yeah. Sure.
To me, that's the most that's the hardest part is it's just, even that you have something that sounds like so freaky and so out of this world and strange and wacky, it's very, very human, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah. Yeah. But anyway, I was saying banishing is there's all the ritual. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It reminds me of, like, I've read some people mention that this was in a book, or just like even Greys. You know, Greys are known for needing a good banishing every now and then. And people are like, yeah, just like start calling whatever god you want. Doesn't even matter. Just call for Allah or like Jesus or Xenu, like whoever. Just say, hey, Xenu's protecting me. Doesn't want you near me. You know, you can't come near me. Something like that. You know, it's like a banishing, thing you say, but you kind of just make it up on the fly. It's the intention behind it. It's really, and it has a loose structure where the structure is like, hey, you're telling something, you're acknowledging something's doing something, you're telling it can't do it because of this power, and you're just communicating it to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes it doesn't work, but yeah, lots of times it can help. And I think you said like the intention, but anyway.
It also
So,
It also reminds me, like, if we're talking about an individual entity that's attacking you, it's kind of like a bear. You know, you hear stories of a bear encountering a person, a group of people, and sometimes you just scare them away by shouting,
Yeah.
even though they could easily kill you. It's just worth a try, I guess. I don't know about the bear situation, but if you're having an intense paranormal experience, a little banishing,
Yeah, and also just staying grounded in the practical and the mundane.
Oh, yeah.
Clean your house, go to a movie about, like a comedy, go to a party with your friends, just a barbecue, just like light, grounded. Don't start doing a juice fast. Make sure you have food in your stomach. Walk a lot, all that type of stuff to just, go on errands, make a list, just you want to stay in the mundane and distract your attention from that area of reality where this is coming from. So,
Yeah.
So I don't know. Good. Well, this is so fun. I really enjoyed our conversation. It was pretty
Yeah, it
wild.
was so much fun, and it was a really big favor for me. Thank you for you to listen to this. As you can imagine, like nobody wants to hear a crazy guy talking about how you can capture a poltergeist.
Sweetheart,
So
that is exactly the thing that I want to hear all the time.
right. Yeah. Well, I was about to go to like the street corner and just start shouting it out.
Oh, that's fun. Okay. Oh, well, you have a great day.
Okay. Thank you so much for this call, and it was really fun getting to know you and talking to you.
Oh, yeah. I just had a great time. Thank you, too.
Anyway, so so we're back now, and I have notes that I made. Here's some things I thought about this plan. Okay, this first one, I think something that I was thinking about was we have to make this a pleasant experience for the poltergeist. The past, the current timeline while it's trapped, and the future, we have to construct a pleasant experience for the poltergeist. Otherwise, I don't think it'll want to do it. It'll be able to tell the outcome, and if it's unfavorable, I don't think it wants to do anything. That's one practical standpoint, but another standpoint, as a scientist, what I'm studying, which I think is a form of life, I mean, ethically, I have to make this a pleasant experience for this being as much as possible. So much so that there's actually, in biology, if I was to do an experiment with an animal that had bones, a vertebrate animal like a frog or a turtle or a mouse or an eagle. This does not count for invertebrate animals, animals that have no bones, like a starfish or an insect. But if I was going to do research with an animal that has bones, which I'll just go ahead and put this in here, Paul Eno does believe that they have bones because he just says that one time he bumped up against one and he felt bone structure. So more likely this might be a vertebrate animal. So in science, when you are doing an experiment with a vertebrate animal, you have to follow certain guidelines. It's a lot of paperwork, but totally worth it. So this is an organization that oversees this, and it is called let's see. Okay. It's an Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee, or as sometimes called IACUC. Okay, so this is a description. IACUC is a local working group that research facilities must appoint in accordance to the Animal Welfare Act, or the AWA, and the PHS policy on humane care and use of laboratory animals. At least one member of the IACUC must be a veterinarian with the responsibility for providing care to these animals used in research, and one must be a public member not affiliated with the institution in any way other than performing IACUC duties. So I would have to do this. Okay, it's a gray area because this animal is it's unconfirmed. It's a fantastical animal that most scientists would laugh at me for studying, but I believe it's real. So I'll have to follow IACUC guidelines. But I think this is good because I mean I want it to be comfortable, and I have to show it a level of respect, the same respect you would give another living thing. That's the level of respect I will give this entity. I can't prejudge it. Okay, so then let's see what else. Okay, here's a question for you. This is really important. I hadn't asked you this before, but this has the implications of this question have a lot to do with trapping poltergeists. Do you believe poltergeist entities can read minds or read memories?
Oh yeah, that's all they do. I mean, this is one of the big things that I was thinking that you would have to think about if you were doing this type of experiment, which is, um, I wrote about this on my blog at the Gnostic Closet, actually about the whole cupcake incident, which is
Hmm.
that a large part of the reason why I believe these type of events are considered taboo in our society is not just due to the fact that they're doing things that shouldn't necessarily have happen, right? You know, they're breaking the laws of time and space, but these type of situations and incidents in the paranormal generally tend to reveal the unconscious. They reveal secrets. I mean, some of the most famous poltergeists, the Bell Witch and Jeff the Talking Mongoose, they were
Hmm.
notorious gossips, right? Jeff would like ride the bus down into town and come back and tell everyone, you know, what all the naughty things people had been doing, right? The Bell Witch was very vindictive about you know, gossiping and revealing bad behaviors about people that she did not like. And this happens a lot. Even just the fact of having a poltergeist infestation is, you know, many times going to reveal secrets about, you know, unhappiness or these type of things that are in the household. There is an
Yes.
incident, I can't remember the name of it, but it's in Colin Wilson's book Poltergeist, and it was kind of a poltergeist slash haunting. These people had moved into a house. I think it was a couple and their young son, and they would have these incidents where they would see this apparition that would make noise. It was like a man with his throat cut open, and then the child was unbidden drawing these type of gory pictures of this type of thing. Anyway, so it turned out, and this is like in the 50s or 60s, I think, that the husband was actually gay, and so there was a lot of tension between the husband and the wife, and they basically both admitted that they were using this haunting to kind of get at each other about this stuff that they
Oh,
couldn't, at that time and place, really talk about or resolve.
yeah.
So to me, this would be a big something to consider in this type of experiment, which is what type of secrets are going to come out? How are you going to handle it? When these secrets come out, of course, that releases a big burst of energy, which then just feeds the entity. What's it going to do with it? Um, and, you know, if you do manage to find a bunch of people who don't really have a problem with that, is there just not going to be any juice to run the experiment, essentially?
What I was thinking was that when I first approach these actors, I'll probably just give them envelopes with information, and I won't tell them anything. And I'll be like, "Hey, please don't talk about this a lot." And the reason is because if this poltergeist thing is coming back all the way to this point in time and watching us, I want it to be hard for it to understand what's happening. But if I'm out there saying like, "Hey, we want you to catch a poltergeist. Are you down?" Then the
Mhm.
thing it and it might be up. Just
Yeah,
another picture.
that's the other problem, though, is that a lot of these poltergeists can read and write.
Okay. Yeah.
So usually it takes them a while to kind of get that type of ability going. Lots of times in these, it's another thing to consider. Many times in these infestations, especially the ones that tend to go on for a while and have really wild, out there, strong kind of events coming up, is that it will start out very kind of disorganized and small, almost unnoticeable. You know, you have like just like scratching in the walls is a classic one that you would start off with. But then as you go on, it's like these entities learn more how to become more creative and forceful in their manifestations. So you will have them, you know, writing things on walls, or, you know, pulling your covers off, levitating the bed, you know, all these type of crazy things, throwing people across the rooms, you know, holding objects down that are, so that's another thing to consider, is that what happens if at some point this entity becomes so adept that it can read and write, that it can understand digital communications and go back in time and discover all your plans.
Definitely problems that could be very dangerous for sure.
Yes.
So let's see if I have anything else here. And as far as safety, there is no this plan lacks an adequate safety protocol if things were to go bad, or if we wanted to completely dismantle it. So because of that, this plan should not go forward. But I
It's
thought,
fascinating, though. I really enjoyed thinking about this, and to me, I feel like I'll be thinking about it for quite a while because it's like,
I think
how how can you get around some of these issues? No, it's fascinating.
it'd be. I've been looking for an idea to make it to a short film, and I was like, well, maybe this could be like a really weird short film, because there's so many weird elements, you know. So I would write this plan. It would be a movie on what if this plan were implemented, and the great thing is, of course, it has to go really badly, and it'll end up being in the form of like a Jurassic Park. Like, don't mess with this type of science if you don't understand it. But I think it'd be funny, like if there was a community and then like there was this couple that lived there, you know, they just acted super weird. You really didn't know why, but it was because they're running this experiment, you know. And I
That'd
don't
be
know, like
funny.
some kids break in and they see a couple of dummies laying there instead of the people, and they're like, "What the hell's going on here?" And then
It's
some
funny. I
doppelgangers
just
come out. It's like, whoa.
that is well, not to mention like this is kind of like the weird stuff that they'd see happening from the poltergeist that got going.
Right.
I was, it's funny because I was just corresponding with someone recently, and I put it up on my blog about this whole thing, which is that because a lot of this has to do with your attention, right? This has to do with instead of focusing on just these weird or the mundane, right? A certain part of you has decided that it just really needs to kind of break the normal bonds and focus on and bring into manifestation, however it can, these kind of other realities, these other states of consciousness. And so I was talking with this person, and he was talking about how he'll get into these, he has been in the past, in these various, and usually in his context, I think one of it was with a very emotionally fraught, exciting relationship with a woman, with a lot of kind of unresolved conflict and energy floating around.
Okay.
That he'd have a lot more of these kind of boundary shattering experiences, and he just realized that he just can't be in there, so he manages his attention and what he does in life, to tamp this down because he just, he can't be in that space. I think some people can and they can handle it, but other people can't. And you really have to respect, because I'll hear people or speak to people in the community, people who are interested in all these strange events, UFOs, poltergeist, Bigfoot, other paranormal stuff. And they'll say, why is this person acting this way? Why are they being cagey? Why aren't they just upfront? Why are they? I think a lot of the times is because these ideas themselves can cause effects in your consensus reality, in manifest reality, which is another problem with this experiment. Even just thinking about it a lot, if you are the right person at the right space and you have the right quality of attention towards it, it can have repercussions in your physical reality. And I think a lot of people, this is why they, bug out of conversations, or they're only going to share so much with you, is because they got that the best way of tamping these phenomena down is to not pay attention to them and to diligently pay attention to something else, which can be difficult.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
Interesting.
yeah, it's a wild world out there.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, I guess that's all I have to say about the topic. I think I will revisit it. I may do this idea, like a short story kind of thing. I've always thought this sounds like something the military would put a lot of money behind and then botch horribly. And I was like, well, yeah, I could live in a gold mansion with a botch success. Do I really? No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, it does sound like something that a government would want to do, and just they want to weaponize it. It's so corny. They'd be like, "Oh, I gotta weaponize this poltergeist."
Weaponized polter. Well, but Charles Fort talks about that, right? In Wild Talents, This Poltergeist
yeah.
girls. He talks about them, exploding a warship, sitting in their school chairs and taking their gum out and sticking it under the chair before they have to focus their minds on blowing up this enemy, ship or something. I just love that
Wow.
image.
Nice.
But exactly, yes, yeah. So.
Cool. All right. Well, let me pull this up again. So, thank you very much, Stephanie, for having this discussion with me. And I just want to tell everybody that you should definitely check out Stephanie Quick at her blog, which is stephaniequick.home.blog.
I think it's .wordpress.com. It's called
Okay.
Ghost Dog is a Mystery Box, if you want to look at it from that way. And it's WordPress, so.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So if you want, do a Google search for Ghost Dog is a Mystery Box, esoteric memoir. And then she's on Twitter as Wanderin Britches, and Wanderin is spelled Wanderin, and Britches is spelled Britchz. And she's on Facebook as Stephanie Quick. Thank you, Stephanie, for going down this rabbit hole with me. I'm a changed person. I need to get some ice cream.
Yay. My work here is done. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation and got some fresh ideas. And yeah, it'd be great to revisit this, I think, for you in a while and see what you think and what other people have to think about it. But yeah, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.